Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Waalaikumsalam.
How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. Okay. So today we will have to present our coursework, right?
Yes, also one Tslb 3 to 8.
Okay. So let's introduce ourselves first.
So my name is Muhammad Farhan bin Khalid from Tslb.
And I am Muhammad Hafizuddin bin Abdul Rahman, also from Tslb.
Okay, so let's go into the discussion.
So Farhan, I think we need to have a discussion about the state of English language acquisition among Malaysian students. Don't you think that it is concerning that after years of formal education, many students they still struggle to express themselves confidently in English? So this raises a fundamental question, sir. Why is English proficiency so difficult to attain despite being a core subject in school? Since we see them in UPSR, we see them in SPM, but some students they still struggle to talk in English fluently.
Yeah, so you raise a very valid point of this. So the issue is not necessarily about students' lack of effort, but rather the structural challenges within our education system and our learning environment too. English is primarily a second language, which is a L2 in Malaysia, which means that students are not naturally exposed to it outside the classroom. If we examine the social-linguistic landscape, right, we can see that in some particular rural areas, we notice that students have very limited opportunities to practice their English in a meaningful way.
Now, I agree with you that English is a second language for us Malaysians, since for some of us we have Malay as our first language. Like I have Malay as my first language, and you?
I'm English.
Your English is your first language. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a fascinating one.
Yeah.
So we will have some difference about our opinion lah.
Yeah.
Okay, but we still have a significant concerns that if students do not encounter English in their daily lives, they will struggle to internalize the language. I don't think this is a problem with you as you actually have English as the first language.
Yeah.
But for me personally, as I am a second language, English is my second language, right? So sometimes I have a situation where English remains just an academic subject instead of like a functional tool for me to communicate. So as a result, many students they lack confidence in using English in real world context. But for me, like I am an English teacher, right? So it's not a valid concern for me. But for some students, they lack confidence to use English for their daily life. When they want to go buy something or when they are with their friends, some do not use English at all. So what do you think about the issue that are faced by the students?
So thank you, Hafiz. Very good question actually. So one of the most pressing challenges or issues in English language acquisition among Malaysian students is the lack of exposure to the English language beyond the classroom setting. Unlike in native English-speaking countries like England, you can see in America, all that, children are constantly surrounded by English through daily conversations, which means they use it every day, through media, through conversations, through social interaction. Whereas Malaysian students often find themselves in structured and limited learning environments where English is primarily used during the school hours only. So this limited exposure is particularly evident in rural areas where the dominant language used at home and in the community are Bahasa Malaysia, or just some local dialects. According to Crash's input hypothesis at the year of 1982, second language acquisition is most effective when learners receive sufficient comprehensible input in the target language. However, when English exposure is minimal, students do not receive enough linguistic input to develop natural fluency and also their confidence in using the language outside of academic settings. And additionally, Vygotsky got also a theory, the social cultural theory from 1978, that highlights the importance of social interaction in language learning. Without a rich linguistic environment, students have limited opportunities to engage in authentic, meaningful communication, which is essential for acquiring and internalizing a new language.
I will have to concur with you on that one and the multiple theories you came up with. So if we examine the socio-linguistic realities of rural students, we find that their primary modes of communication revolve around their mother tongue, the national language, which is Malay, or for some Chinese or Indian students, they will use their mother tongue. So unlike urban students who are in the city, they might have more exposure to English speaking media, right? Like books, diverse social interactions where they will communicate with the foreigners. So rural students, they often grow up in a monolingual environment, where English is seen as foreign or just an academic subject. So not a language, not a classroom only language that are used for practical tools for communication, right? So for instance, there are studies conducted by Malaysia's Ministry of Education in 2018. So they found that students in rural schools, they score significantly lower in English proficiency tests compared to their urban counterparts. So this is not necessarily due to a lack of intelligence or motivation, but rather because they do not have the same immersive environments that urban students may benefit from. So a real life example of this disparity you can see in the performance of students in speaking assessments. So Mukundan and Nimek Kisadan, they make a study in 2012 where they found that rural students often exhibit hesitation and they will have shorter speech duration and lower lexical variety compared to urban students. So this indicates that even when rural students know English, they lack the practice needed to apply effectively in spoken discourse. So they might be able to write English essays or paragraphs. They might be able to answer objective questions. But when it comes to speaking and using it as a tool, they suffer from the lack of confidence to use that.
Yes.
And even in urban areas where students might have greater access to English language media, there is still a tendency for students to consume media passively. So, for example, right, they watch movies with subtitles, but they do not actively engage in English conversations. So, this reinforces that they are receptive skills, which are listening and reading, but they do not develop the productive skills, which is speaking and writing. And we can see this in social media right now, right? While English is the used language, but it's only for them to listen and watch or doom scroll. So what do you think are the implications?
So the implications of this lack of exposure are quite serious actually, extending beyond just classroom performance. When students do not engage with English in real life context, they become passive learners who rely solely on textbooks and grammar drills from their teachers, limiting their ability to develop natural speech patterns. Without meaningful exposure, students do not acquire the necessary vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency needed for effective communication in their daily lives. One major consequence of this is the lack of oral proficiency. Many students can understand the language, which is English, to a certain extent, but find it extremely hard and difficult to express their thoughts in this language. They often hesitate when speaking English, searching for words and struggling to form coherent sentences and simple sentences sometimes. This hesitation is not necessarily because they lack knowledge of the language, but rather because they have not been trained to think in English. This aligns with Ellis's theory of second language acquisition, which emphasizes that both input and output are necessary for fluency. Without enough opportunities for output, such as speaking or writing, students will struggle with spontaneous communication. So the long-term effects of this are evident in higher education and the job market too. University students who lack confidence in English struggle with academic writing, presentations, and interviews also, which limits their career opportunities. Employers often cite weak communication skills as one of the main reasons graduates fail to secure jobs, reinforcing the idea that English proficiency is not just an academic requirement but a crucial skill for a professional success.
So their future, right?
Yeah, for their future.
So given the severe consequences of this limited exposure, right, I think it's essential for us to implement strategies that increase students' engagement with English outside of the classrooms. So I would like to come up with my solution, right? So one possible solution is for schools to integrate English immersion activities into their program. So instead of limiting English use to traditional classroom lessons, schools should create opportunities for students to use English in real world context. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
So establishing English speaking zones where students are encouraged or even required to communicate exclusively in English can provide a structured environment where they feel comfortable practicing the language. So one example that I can remember from my classroom days, primary classroom days, is that Wednesday is a day for English usage. So on Wednesday we will have to talk in English for everything.
English only.
English only.
Yeah.
So except for the class, the subject where we use English like bahasa Melayu lah. But for something like going to buy or asking for permissions to go to the toilets, we will have to use English. So I think this reinforces my English speaking skills because I can use it and I can feel comfortable using it because everyone else is also using English. So I don't have to feel embarrassed if I make a mistake. So in addition, extracurricular activities such as debate, drama performance, and storytelling sessions can encourage students to develop their speaking skills in an engaging and interactive manner. So studies on language learning in Singapore, for instance, they have shown that students who participate in public speaking and debate competitions, they demonstrate significantly higher confidence and fluency in English. So for me, I have never involved myself in public speaking, but have you?
Personally, no.
Personally, no. But you did use English in real context, right?
Yes, I did.
So you will have no problem with this. But for the students that don't engage in public speaking or storytelling or anyone where they use English as a spoken skills, they will suffer from lack of exposure. So another effective method is promoting the use of English language media without subtitles. So teachers and parents, they can encourage students to engage with books, podcasts, and news articles in English without the translation itself. So watching English films without relying on subtitles can help to train students' listening and comprehension skill, making it easier for them to pick up natural sentence structures, cues, pronunciations, and even if they want to use subtitles, the students can use English language subtitles. So they will watch a movie in English, but the subtitles are also in English. So when they do that, they will improve their listening skills, and they can read it, and then they can try out and communicate it. And then there are also community-based initiatives. For example, English clubs. They can also play a crucial role. So establishing peer discussion groups where students interact in English outside the school setting, they can reinforce their learning in a more social, low-pressure environment. So countries that have implemented similar initiatives, which I can pick up of is Japan with their English conversation cafes. These cafes, they have seen positive results in students' confidence and willingness to speak English in informal settings, where students, after their schools or even in their weekend, they go to these English conversation cafes and they order in English, talk in English. So this place is like a comfortable setting for them to use English.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so they can socialize with their friends and peers while having their enjoyable time outside in English.
Yeah.
And finally, technology. So technology can be leveraged to enhance exposure. Modern language learning applications such as Duolingo, BBC Learning English, and the Reading Progress tool in Microsoft Teams. These tools all provide interactive opportunities for students to practice their English skills at their own pace. So we can have a virtual exchange program where students interact with peers from English-speaking countries. So this will provide them an authentic conversational practice that helps build real work proficiency.
I agree with Hafiz's point just now. So ultimately, exposure is one of the most critical factors in second language acquisition. If students are provided with more opportunities to engage with English beyond the classroom itself, they will develop greater confidence, fluency, and also linguistic competence. Creating immersive environments where English is used actively in their daily life, whether through school programs, media consumption, or peer interaction, that is crucial in ensuring that students not only learn English but also use it as a tool in real-world communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the key to overcoming this challenge is to shift the perception of English from just being a subject in school, but it's a language that has a practical and meaningful application in their daily life. So we will have to incorporate these innovative teaching methods, right? And we have to foster an immersive learning environment, and we can encourage community engagement. So by doing all this, we can help students build a strong foundation in English that will benefit them throughout their academic and professional careers.
Okay, Hafiz, that is very good from you. Very valid point. So we finished the first issue. How about we go on to the next one? Okay, so let's go to the next issue. So what is the next issue you want to explain about?
So the next critical issues that are faced by students in their English language development is this fear of making mistakes or the psychological barrier that are associated with speaking. So many students, they experience what linguists call language anxiety. So this is a type of communication apprehension that prevents them from actively engaging in conversations or classroom discussions. So they have a fear that is deeply rooted in a worry of making mistakes that may cause judgment from their peers or teachers. So this could occurs in their pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary. So this issue is particularly concerning because language learning is a social process that requires interaction and trial and error. True. So according to Krashen's effective filter hypothesis, when learners experience anxiety or fear, their ability to absorb and process language input diminishes. So instead of using English as a tool for communication, they become overly self-conscious. So this blocks their ability to improve. As a result, despite having the necessary grammatical knowledge, students prefer to remain silent or revert to their mother tongue because they perceive speaking English as a risk rather than an opportunity to improve their skills. True. So this fear have consequences that extend beyond just the classroom. When students they do not develop confidence in using English in school, they carry this hesitation into their professional and social life. So this lack of confidence can have long-term effect on their communication skills. So they may not be able to perform well in their interviews, or they may not be able to collaborate with colleagues in the workplace, or even traveling and interacting with English speakers in everyday situation is a challenge for them.
Okay, thank you, Hafiz. So that's an important observation you made, Hafiz. And this issue is further exacerbated by cultural attitudes towards language learning. In many traditional classroom settings, particularly in Malaysia and other Asian countries too, there is a strong emphasis on accuracy instead of fluency of the language. Students are often taught to prioritize correct grammar and also the sentence structure, the syntax and all that, which inadvertently discourages them from experimenting with the language. So when students perceive mistakes as failures rather than a part of the learning process, they avoid speaking English because they're scared of making mistakes. So it will lead to a vicious cycle of language avoidance and also make them low in their confidence. So moreover, the role of teachers and peer interactions plays a crucial part in reinforcing this fear. In some classroom environments, students who make mistakes may be corrected in a way that feels discouraging or embarrassing for them. If a teacher consistently focuses on errors rather than encouraging communication, students internalize the belief that speaking English is a high-stake activity where failure is not an option. Similarly, if peers mock or correct their classmates harshly, they make fun of them, they make jokes about them, students will become more reluctant to speak, fearing social embarrassment from their parents, from teachers. So additionally, in many non-native English-speaking countries, there is a common belief that English should be spoken flawlessly, or often modeled after native speakers' norms. This unrealistic expectation creates an added layer of anxiety for the students themselves, as students feel that their pronunciation or accent they use is inadequate. In reality, English is a global language with diverse accents and variations. For example, we have Malay English, we have Singaporean English, we have Indian English and all that. And the ability to communicate effectively is far more important than sounding like a native speaker. However, due to these societal pressures, many students remain silent rather than risk making a mistake in pronunciation or grammar.
That's correct. Yeah. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Since you said your English is your first language, right? So do you have something where you have accent that are different from Malaysia?
Oh, about my accent?
Yes.
Well, I was actually living in the UK for 4 years when I was 5 to 9 years old, and I got that accent. But when I came back to Malaysia, everybody around me used the Malaysian English, the Malaysian English, you know how it sounds, right?
Yes.
So after, I cannot just talk British English by myself, so in the end, I adapt myself to talk in Malaysia English because, well, I'm in Malaysia, right? So why do we want to use British English? We have our own identity and our own accent, right? So yeah.
Did you have any stories where students or your peers or your friends they make fun of your British accent in the early stage?
Yeah, thank you for asking actually. So basically there was one time where I was talking to my friends and my teachers too. I was with my teacher, and that time we came back from UK, I came back to Malaysia, so they asked me to read. So the first word was A, it was spelled A-I-R.
A-I-R.
In Malay, we say air, but I read it air, so everybody laughed. It's not air, it's air, water. So yeah, so water to oxygen, all that is different, two different forms. So from there, I had people make fun of me. And there's another story that my friend used me. He said, try to talk to the teacher, use kawaku. Cakap, can you? Cakap, yes. And I tried to use it to my teacher and say like, teacher, kau dari mana? Or like, then I was like, wow, why did the teacher scold me because I used that language? So yeah, it was very embarrassing for me.
So this have consequence to your second language, which is Malay, right?
Yes.
So outside the classroom, this fear manifests in real-life situations where English is needed. So for many students, despite years of their English education, they struggle with basic conversations when traveling. So this not only limits their personal and professional growth, but also reinforces a negative cycle where they perceive themselves as incapable English speakers, which lower their motivation to improve.
So, given the serious consequences of this issue, right? So let's go to the solutions for this issue. So the first solution is to encourage a growth mindset actually. So where students view mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failures. So Carol Dweck's growth mindset theory suggests that when learners believe that intelligence and ability can improve through effort, they become more willing to take risks and persist through challenges. Teachers can reinforce this mindset by providing constructive feedback to them rather than focusing solely on correctness. They correct the students every time, it's wrong, 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 wrong. Instead of saying that's wrong, teachers can rephrase their feedback in a way that encourages self-correction, such as that's a good attempt. Can you think of another way to say it? So we give them constructivism for them to build themselves, to improve themselves again. So another practical strategy is to incorporate cognitive activities like role plays, storytelling, informal conversation with friends that allow students to practice the English in a low pressure environment. So when the focus shifts getting everything right to simply expressing ideas, students become more comfortable using the language. So studies in task-based language teaching shows that students who engage in interactive tasks without fear of immediate correction develop better long-term fluency than those who are constantly monitored for their accuracy in the language instead of their fluency. So additionally, we can use a peer support system that can help alleviate their anxiety. So parents students with a language buddy, for example, I have a friend and my friend is quite weak in English, so I can be paired with him. So schools can organize English speaking clubs or casual conversation corners where students can practice the English outside of formal classroom setting. Countries like Finland and the Netherlands actually already do this because they are known for their high English proficiency despite being non-native environments. Incorporate these formal, informal learning spaces, making language practice a natural part of students' daily routines. Furthermore, last one is technology can also play a role in reducing anxiety through private practice. Language learning apps like Reading Progress or Microsoft Teams and all the other apps allow students to practice speaking and receive AI-generated feedback without the fear of judgment from their classmates. Similarly, there are many AI chatbots actually with and also voice recognition softwares that enable students to engage in stimulated conversations, building confidence before speaking in real life situations.
But I agree with all your points except for technology. I agree that technology is useful to reduce anxiety or something like that.
Yes.
But we will also have to look up at the fact that the conversations that are in the technological or digital chatbot, are they really meaningful in daily life context?
That's actually a very good question actually because the meaning of meaningful is like for the students have to learn something new, right? Learn something before. But if you learn with AI, they don't have any facilitator, right? They have the teachers, the guider. So I think like in the AI chatbots, they have like a prompt ready for students for learning. So when you press it, they will have their own guided, guided practice for the English language.
But I think we can look at this in some other way. For example, digital chatbots, they usually make students more this is a private practice, right?
Yeah.
So students are more comfortable to talk about something outside the context of daily life. So they might not talk about how to buy or their conversation with their friends because they feel like that's something that they can already do in the real world. So they might use digital chatbot for something inappropriate or rather dangerous to them.
Yeah.
Is it that?
I actually support the argument from Hafiz there because yeah, even though the students can learn, but they have also the consequences, right, from the chatbots, the technology itself. So I think parents play a big role here. So they need to take care. They need to facilitate the son, the daughter, the children when using their learning tablets and all that. So yeah.
So we will have to have a facilitator for technology usage,
Yes,
right?
we will have to. For now, yes.
Okay. So I think we can compromise that technology is useful, but we have to have something that can guide them, someone that can guide them to use the technology itself, right? Alright. So ultimately, overcoming this fear of making mistakes requires cultural and educational shift. Instead of treating errors as something to be avoided, teachers and parents and students, they should recognize that mistakes are a natural and necessary part of learning.
Yes, that's true. So, absolutely, the key is to create a learning culture that prioritizes communication over perfection by normalizing mistakes, encouraging risk-taking, and providing opportunities for students for real-life practice. We can also help students develop not only stronger English proficiency, but also greater confidence in their ability to express themselves effectively. Yeah, so do you have anything to say, Hafiz?
Take learning English comes with challenges, from limited exposure to psychological barriers like fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
So these obstacles often prevent students from developing fluency and confidence. However, if we have a right approach, such as like the solutions we came up with, like immersive activities, interactive learning, and supportive environments, students can overcome these difficulties. Like how we actually did overcome this, right? For you, like for your English is a first language, but for me English is a second language. So it's rather hard for me to see English outside the academic context because I live in a rural area itself, where we didn't use English very much. So encouraging practical language use can foster a positive mindset.
Okay, so in the end, to end this, mastering English is a journey that requires effort, persistence, and the right strategies. By making learning more engaging and accessible, we can empower students to use English effectively for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I have fun in these discussions.
Me too.
Even though we did have a disagreement at the technology.
So this is the references. Yeah. So we can check ourselves after. So that's all from us. Thank you very much.